Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I'm here to answer the question, is Assassin's Creed Syndicate a buggy mess? And yes, that probably sounds like a very aggressive, very forward question, but if you cast your minds back to last November with Assassin's Creed Unity, I think it's an appropriate question to ask. Like many Assassin's Creed fans last year, I was distraught when I started to play Unity at launch. The bugs were numerous, the graphics were blurry, the performance was, I think, to say subpar would be an understatement. It was just a bit of a technical mess, and I think a large part of that was over-ambition. And so it's only natural to be wary of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which has come out less than a year after the technical mess that was Unity. And while they did eventually fix Unity, I played it fairly recently on the PC and it's actually a very nice looking game, runs very well. We cannot simply forgive Ubisoft for delivering such a shoddy product on release, especially when they are so forward with encouraging you to pre-order. If you encourage customers to pre-order, then you should also bring a very good product upon release. I mean, not to do so is to make a mockery of your advertising. And I made a video earlier this year urging people not to pre-order Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and I stand by that because it would have been foolish to have gone in blind and expected them to just do better. However, to my surprise, they have done better. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is in almost every way a superior experience to Unity. Now, I can't call this a review as such because I won't be delving into every aspect of the game. In fact, this is mostly going to focus on the technical side of things, on the PlayStation 4, I should say. But I would like to mention as much as I can because I do really enjoy Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Although I should preface that by saying I am an Assassin's Creed fan. I have played every entry in the series, excluding the handheld ones. I just didn't have time for that. Even, I've played Rogue, I've played from Assassin's Creed 1, and I played through Unity. I waited for it to get fixed, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And so I do have a natural inclination towards the Assassin's Creed series, and I do think that Ubisoft do a reasonably good job of keeping the franchise fresh with new environments, new gameplay mechanics, changing the way things work slightly. So, for instance, something that has changed throughout the series is the combat system. Initially, it was just going through iterations of improvements, but then with Assassin's Creed 3, they gave it a bit of an overhaul, and then they did the same thing with Unity, and they've done the same thing again with Syndicate. When they did it to Unity, I thought they did it more or less for the worst, because it felt, in my opinion, very slow-paced, and I think as you got more powerful, it became somewhat more enjoyable, but on the whole, I cannot say I really enjoyed it in Unity. It felt like it was just, you almost wading through mud to do attacks. It was too slow. But the opposite is the case with Syndicate. In Syndicate, your attacks are very quick, and you use weapons that back this up. So you can use knuckle dusters, which I really like to use with Jacob, and then you can use hidden canes, and you can also use like little blades, but they're all relatively small weapons which allow you to attack very quickly with them. Although, as it's similar to Unity in that there is a level-based system, so if you try and take on, a level 8 character when you're level 2, it's going to take a while to take them down, but if you're fighting level-appropriate enemies, the combat is fun, it's frenetic, and it feels quite fresh in comparison to Unity. So I do very much approve of the combat system here. Now, you may say when you play it, there is an element of button mashing to it, but the same could be said for even some of the greatest combat systems like Batman Arkham Free Flow Combat. It disguises it quite well, but you are pressing the X or square button quite a lot in that and then pressing the Y button to counter, whereas in this it's similar in that, I'm using the PlayStation 4, so you're pressing the square button to attack quite a lot, and then you press the circle button to do a counter attack, but you can also use the X button to break an enemy's guard. You can also dodge enemy projectiles by pressing the triangle button if you do it in time, and I think there's just enough variety to prevent it from feeling cheap. It does feel skill-based. So long as the combat system is skill-based, so long as it isn't just button mashing, I'm all in favour of it, and it also has to feel good, and Assassin's Creed Syndicate feels quick. It feels like attacks are having a degree of impact, although I wouldn't say it does it quite as well as a game like Mad Max, but it is there. and so on the whole I do enjoy the combat system in this game, but I can imagine some people may liken it to being quite repetitive, but I would say that of so many combat systems, even the Arkham series to an extent, which I hold in the highest regard. But something that I really enjoy about Syndicate is the setting, and I maybe have a little bit of a bias there because I am from England. I go to London often for my job, and seeing it in the industrial era it's just a pleasure. It's just so brilliant seeing a place I go to every day, but seeing it in this entirely different setting and seeing how different it was. And even if you don't enjoy the gameplay, even if you don't enjoy the story, just to see industrial era Victoria London is fantastic. It's wonderful seeing Big Ben, seeing the Thames populated with all these cargo ships, seeing St Paul's, seeing these iconic landmarks fully realised and fully climbable is wonderful. It feels so authentic. Going to like Whitechapel, going to Westminster, it's just without any other aspect of the gameplay, just exploring Victorian London is superb. It's superb. And comparing it to other cities that have previously been in the Assassin's Creed series, I would say the biggest standout would be, well, first of all, how modern it is, and secondly, how wide the streets are, which does make a difference because it means you can't just plainly hop between buildings in the way you've been able to do in the past. You have to make use of the grapple hook, which is a new and much welcomed feature, which allows you to, well, either scale buildings a lot quicker or B, cover large distances. It's not quite like it is in, say, again, the Batman Arkham series. It won't just instantly fire you up. You attach yourself and you have to be relatively close. You can't fire too freely, which is a good thing ultimately because it means it doesn't just replace the parkour, but going back to it, you fire it up and then you have to pull yourself up or pull yourself along. There's still a physical element to it. And it doesn't make parkour at all redundant. And then going to the parkour, effectively this is the same as the parkour in Unity, which I really enjoyed. I would say actually it feels somewhat stiffer than Unity though in places, but it's functional, it works. That innovation they introduced where you can free run up or down, it just makes so much sense and it's so helpful in these environments where there is a lot of verticality involved. There's also the fact that you now have two different assassins to play with. You have Jacob and you have Evie. Their personalities really work well with each other, where Jacob is quite brash, quite forward, and then you've got Evie who's more methodical. And that setup always works very well. They're twins, they're brother and sister, and I just think it's a great dynamic they have there. The fact that there is this duality makes them one of the most memorable assassin pairs of the series. I mean, Arno, I can barely remember anything about Arno. Really, Jacob and Evie, they are rivaling Ezio in terms of how memorable they are. So, major props to the actual assassins in this series. There's also a slightly more light-heartedness to the way the story is told. The characters are quite charismatic, almost exaggerated, but very much done very well. It makes them more memorable. I love the way Charles Darwin and Charles Dickens are done here. I really enjoy it. So those are the core aspects I can talk about so far. But refocusing on the technical side of things, which is a big deal when you compare it to Unity. Whether you're playing it on the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4, it is a 900p game. And unfortunately, I could tell that. You can see the game is a bit blurrier than most other PlayStation 4 games. And okay, that is a drawback. Also, the game, while most of the time is at 30 frames per second, there are times where it does drop. Once or twice it gets into silly territory. I couldn't give you the exact number, I'm not some kind of robot that can do that, but just from a player giving his feedback, I'd say it only goes into difficult, unplayable territory very rarely, but for the most time it's 30 or just below it, like, 27 frames per second, and it's, for the most part, it's fine. Perfectly playable is what I'd say. And when you compare it to other console variants of Assassin's Creed, it's very much in line with those, excluding Unity, which was abysmal, which was constantly dropping below 20, which is just not acceptable. You might think to yourself, well, how come we're playing this game at 900p, 30 frames per second? Come on, Ubisoft, pull your finger out. How come another open world game like Metal Gear Solid The Phantom Pain can go 1080p 60 and be open world? And I've heard that thrown around, but I think if you look more deeply into it, the Assassin's Creed series, from a technical standpoint, has always been very ambitious. And in the case of Unity, it was a victim of its own ambition. What they've done here is they've reeled back. They've decided okay, yes, we can make these enormous cities, we can have large numbers of NPCs on screen, we can put lots of detail, we can have incredible physics-based lighting, but they know their limits now, and they've very sensibly come back on it a bit to make the game more stable. And to that, Ubisoft, I say well done. You've learnt your lesson. I think it's much worse if a company messes up and then continues to mess up. If Syndicate was a technical abomination like Unity before it, they could have very easily sunk the Assassin's Creed franchise. But luckily, it's not rock solid. Don't get me wrong, it's not rock solid. They haven't made it amazing, but it is perfectly playable. You know, there's no real issue. I'm not gonna try and lie and say this game looks phenomenal, it runs buttery smooth, but it is absolutely acceptable. But then you have to take into account that the way the game actually looks from a graphical point of view, excluding frame rate and excluding resolution, every now and then this game will blow you away with the way it handles lighting. I mean, it can look genuinely jaw-dropping. I think I've managed to capture a few points in this game when it's during the day, when the light is just pouring onto the streets, and I can just take a step back and think, wow, that is very nice. If only the resolution and the frame rate was tightened up, this would be a class-leading open-world game. Effectively and unfortunately, these games are somewhat ahead of their time, ahead of the hardware. I think if the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were just a little bit more powerful, then these games would be incredible to experience. But they're riding that line. Unity fell below it. Syndicate is just above it. And so there you have it, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, superior to Unity in almost every way. As always people, thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe, and see you next time.